Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to NLA and to our discussion this morning on delivering successful estate renewal in London. And we're organising that, of course, in the light of the government's commission on Estate Regeneration Advisory Panel chaired by Lord Heseltine, and also a report produced by Future of London on delivering estate renewal. And I think our post-war estates are fascinating in that they were a huge triumph in our ability to deliver the sorts of numbers that we ought really to be delivering today, but also, of course, they were one of our greatest disasters in that the quality of a lot of them as they were built and also their maintenance afterwards left a lot to be desired. So it is also, housing at the moment as we lead up to the mayoral election, top of the agenda, and estate renewal comes at the top of that agenda as well. So I think a lot to talk about this morning, and I'm going to hand over chairing this session to Lisa Taylor, who is the Director of Future of London and who has been responsible for preparing this report on delivering estate renewal. And I would also like to thank Bilfinger GVA for sponsoring the event. And hand over to Lisa.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people here for a topic that is obviously close to all of our hearts. Thanks also to Bilfinger GVA, Pollard, Thomas Edwards, and Lewis Silkin for making the report possible and the roundtable series as well. For any of you who know us, we do best practice mostly. We tend not to be big pushing policy people necessarily. And this whole series began with 3 roundtables set up for last autumn, at which point our chair, David Lunt, said, there's too much going on this autumn. Just wait until it gets calmer. Obviously, it's never going to get calmer, certainly not for a while, but we did decide to go ahead this spring, especially in response to the housing bill that was passing through, and to, at the same time, the Prime Minister's Sync Estate program and initiative for the 140 million for 100 estates across the country. Our feeling was that London is different. Everyone in that room knows that. The pressures are different. The options are different. And we wanted to make sure that we had experienced contributors offering up what could be done, aside from taking this sort of sweeping and quite negative approach. In the end, we had sets of recommendations. The top one is to central government, of course, and I'll get to those in a sec. But we also wanted to make sure that we had recommendations for the GLA and for what we broadly called the sector, which is local authorities, boroughs, builders, partners, everyone who's actually building and delivering housing. And that also for us includes residents. The roundtables we had range from Barrett's London, our MD, and also to Southwark tenant representatives and everyone in between, which is a really good thing to see. The overarching recommendations are these. The main one is acknowledge that London is different. It has to operate in a different way, and we need to create new homes as well as look at worst homes. One of the things that we got to in the report was the fact that the question of why are we doing estate renewal, and that's changed significantly. The stock, by and large, it may not all be great, but it's not terrible. One of the problems now is that we're asking residents to move when typically what they tend to live in isn't all that terrible. So you're asking them to face disruption, you're asking them to face massive uncertainty and fear when their homes are not as bad. As Peter mentioned, when they were doing estates in the earlier days, it was coming from slums. That's not necessarily the case anymore. In between is also the question of right to buy. Even if you are a fan of refurbishment, right to buy will stop you. We're hoping for them to either exempt London or at least rethink it, or at least be more flexible on local authority use of receipts for that so it can be put towards building. Same one, and ask for raising the HRA borrowing cap so councils can do more. That's a recurring request. And then also one thing that came very strongly from the series of roundtables, and it's kind of what we'll focus on today, is this idea that estate renewal is not just episodic, it is an actual phase of life in London, and we need to be able to support long-term meanwhile in communications for residents and also for local businesses who operate in those areas, so that what's happening through this period of disruption isn't seen as completely horrific. It's actually something that's decent and okay. Also, there's a piece of work coming out with Peabody and a partner this summer where they've discovered that people in social housing are responsible for 15 billions worth of value to the London economy. You can break that up however you like, but that's primarily jobs and work that they provide for the city. we would suggest that central government use that research, commission its own research if it likes, to look at the economic contribution of people in estates and think about them possibly even as economic stakeholders, not just a burden. This is critical, and I think it will help get some of the residents on side. And then, of course, after they agree with all of these things, we're asking for clarify all aspects of the housing bill to get clarity ahead. Next steps. Future of London, as most of you will know, is a network that crosses many, many areas of London. We're offering support of the people on the round table to the Heseltine Estate Regeneration Panel. Simon Brown is with us today from the panel. Also, of course, to mayoral candidates and the broader London sector. And today is one of many events that we see happening. Bilfinger GBA is doing its own series as well, where we'll focus a little bit on the community aspect of this, because if you don't get that right in the beginning, nothing else is going to happen. These are our speakers today, and I'm going to pass over now to Gerry Hughes, who's Executive Director of Bilfinger GBA.
Well, good morning, everybody. If you just arrived in this country for the first time, you'd actually think we just invented the concept of estate renewal. You know, it features on our national #1 TV channel, on practically primetime TV. We've got our most eminent politician leading a task force to look into the concept. It's the answer to our housing problems in London. It's the answer to our benefit problems, our social problems, etc., etc. Well, in actual fact, we've been doing estate renewal since estates were created, frankly. And I personally have been working on estate renewal for about 20 years or so. So there's nothing particularly new in even what I'm going to say today, or even what you're going to hear today. But there are lessons to be learned, and we have to continue to have discussion groups like this where we can share experiences and apply good practice. What I will say in doing that, there is no one solution to every estate. There is no quick fix. So when I read the release from the Prime Minister first time round, when he, in the same sentence practically, referred to one of our projects, the Winstanley Estate, and an estate renewal project in Rochdale. Well, I can tell you, having worked in Rochdale, the two are completely poles apart in terms of what you can and can't do. There are lessons to be learned, of course, that are cross-applicable, but they're very, very different. What I'd like to do today, and I could talk about this for much longer than just 10 minutes, and I'm sure if I do go over those 10 minutes, I'll be stopped. But I want to just focus on, I broaden my scope out to take that broad perspective, because it's important we look at this in the round. It's important we just don't focus on one aspect of estate renewal. It is the most complex form of urban development. It is the most complex form of urban generation. I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about the concept of strategy. I want to talk about the process of engagement. I'll only touch upon this because some of my colleagues are going to speak about this in more detail. And I'm going to focus on delivery. And those three things are not mutually exclusive. They're completely interrelated. And you have to think about them in a joined up, interrelated way. And I'm just going to refer, as I go through, to one of our projects, which was referred to by the Prime Minister, the Winstanley Estate, Winstanley Yacht Road, to give its full title, in Battersea, not in Clapham, but adjacent to Clapham Junction. But I want to start maybe by just saying this, and this is something that really winds me up. You know, the concept that you can actually come along and master plan a community is completely false. There is no design solution to, and excuse the architects in this room, excuse me if I upset the architects in this room, there is no design solution to this problem, or to, in fact, to any urban problem. What you can do, though, and design is a key part of the process, is you can, or we can, collectively, facilitate the process of creating or regenerating a place or an estate. And that's what estate renewal is really about. It's about facilitating the process, working with all the stakeholders to get to a solution where you can create a sustainable community going forward. So turning to strategy. Strategy is not a master plan, but it may well have a master plan as part of the mix. It is by its very nature multifaceted. It requires all the skills in this room and many more There's no one custodian of all those skills. There's no one organisation that has all those skills. It does have at its heart, though, the concept of revitalising the community, working with the community from the very outset. One thing that we find often when we get involved in these projects is that the objectives behind the programme, the initiative, are not always clear, or even when they're in conflict. So you will have the conflict, the objectives of the local authority, you will have the objectives of the community, you'll have other stakeholders. So a key starting point for the strategy process is start to align those objectives. And those objectives may well evolve and change over a period of time. We also have to think about the neighbourhood. And I stop, when I get involved in these projects, we stop using the word estate. And we start talking about neighbourhood. We do away with the red line. Every brief I get, frankly, there's a red line around this social estate. We forget about that. It's the first instruction. Forget about estate, forget about the red line. Think about the neighbourhood. Go back to basics, define the neighbourhood, look at the foundations of the place. What made this place work in the past? Why is it not working now? And start to think about it on that broader platform. And it's clearly not just about physical development. That's a statement of the bleeding obvious, if there ever was one. We obviously have to create new buildings, but we're really about creating new communities, or revitalising the existing communities. And the final point is delivery from the outset. What is it we're going to achieve, but also how are we going to achieve it? What is the art of the possible? And this is very important when we come on to engage with the community. We need to be absolutely honest with the community about what is possible. You cannot just give them a blank sheet of paper and say, let's hear your views, please, because then you raise false expectations. So we, professionals, the councils, have to be clear what the parameters are. Winstanley and York Road, just a little bit of, if you read this document, it's on the website, I think, you will get a very good flavour of what this project's about. This is the information memorandum. We're right in the middle of the process to find a delivery partner. But essentially, this is a 60-70 concrete estate, 2 estates, York Road and Winstanley, just north of Clapham Junction. In Battersea, demolition in the 60s and 70s of the traditional terraced street network, very dense. Believe me, lots of problems. That is not the panacea. That wouldn't have been the solution to fix those up at the time. But equally, we've got it wrong, and we're now having to fix it again. The strategy has evolved to a situation where we're talking about a combined refurbishment and redevelopment programme, keeping all the social housing that are affected by that redevelopment programme in the scheme, keeping all those social tenants, but an additional 2,000 new homes, and replacing all the social and community infrastructure. And we're right in the middle of finding a partner at the moment. But the strategy process is still ongoing. The strategy, we're not finished the strategy. The strategy process is still ongoing. The strategy process started before we got involved. But it has involved engagement with a panoply of different organisations. And it does do physical things. It does think about the right physical ingredients, putting the connections back in between the river and Clapham Junction Station, connecting back into the adjoining neighbourhoods, retaining the public space. But it also does other things. It starts to talk about, well, what do the community really need to make this a sustainable place? How do we mix up the nature of the resident mix? What commercial components are required alongside the community components? And also, how are we going to manage this place going forward into the future? Etc., etc., etc. And those are set out in a document as far as we can see at the moment, but we recognise that will be evolving. For example, when we got housing zone status, which came out of the blue, certain aspects of the strategy needed to change to adjust to that, to allow us to take advantage of that opportunity. And I've no doubt, as policy keeps changing, we have to adjust our strategy to respond to policy. So it's an evolving process. Working with the community, and this is something I'm going to probably skate over, not because I don't think it's important. I think it's probably the most important thing, but others are going to talk about it. This is about engagement and participation in the whole process. It's not consultation on its own. It's fully involved engagement. It has its challenges, and I always tell this story when I talk about estate renewal. A number of years ago, longer than I care to remember, I was doing an estate renewal project in Ordsall in Salford. Most of you may not know Ordsall, but Ordsall is one of the most deprived parts of Salford. And right in the middle of Ordsall, there is a stately home, Grade 1, medieval, built by the Radcliffe family. And we were in this infamous evening. We were sitting something like this, but with older people. And this elderly gentleman said, clearly getting frustrated by the proceedings, "I have to say, this is a completely ridiculous place to build a stately home in the middle of a council estate." and that's, you have to just deal with those sort of issues. They pop up time and time again. It's about deep understanding, and this is the only way you get deep understanding is by talking to the people who live there. As professionals, we will never get that understanding without doing that. Keeping the community together. The community is not the problem, despite the sink estate concept. What's in it for residents? This is the leaseholder, the social tenants, the leaseholders, the resident leaseholders, the non-resident leaseholders. Be absolutely clear from the outset what the offer is. Dealing with a whole range of third-party stakeholders. In Winstanley alone, I'll come on to talk about that in a moment, we're dealing not just with the social tenants, the resident leaseholders, the non-resident leaseholders, businesses, two churches, various other charities, TFL. There probably is an NFL somewhere, I don't know. TFL, GLA, council, various council departments. It is a challenge. Okay, the final point, 100%, you will never get 100% support. Don't ever think you will. I'm being told I'm running out of time. Just very quickly on Winstanley, we achieved through a process of engagement, one-to-one even, with a liaison team on site, new office on site now, we achieved 75% support for our strategy before we went to market. And I think that's a real achievement, actually. We're quite proud of that. Viability, deliverability is critical. It's about more than a development. The one thing that I would emphasise in terms of deliverability, apart from focusing out from the outset, is that the real issue with these projects, particularly not particularly in London, but is a feature in London, is cash flow. Because the massive issue up front is the cost of moving people and buying in property and putting in infrastructure. And if you're taking a longer term perspective, you have to manage the balance between income and outgoings. And that can present a real challenge. But it is about taking that longer term perspective, building value in the place over the longer term, and then finding a way of capturing that value back into the programme. There are issues around housing revenue account land and general fund land, which I give a whole lecture on because it's really complex. We have to move one between the other, and we have both in the Winstanley York Road estate. Virginia's here from our CPO team. One of the frustrations we have is that we do not have often a clear land assembly strategy from the very outset. We try and reinvent that after the event. And that's one of the reasons why the West Hen estate featured in the BBC programme, is because they didn't get that strategy right from the outset. The delivery process itself, there is no one ideal way of delivering or engaging the private sector in the delivery process. Certain authorities, Hackney is a good example, move towards a self-development model where they do a lot of the work themselves and then bring a developer or contractor in to work with them to build it out. We are opted for a joint venture approach in Winstanley, York Road, or there's a fairly traditional development agreement. All depends upon the risk that the council are prepared to take, the amount of work they're prepared to put in, the experience they have, etc., etc. But there are lessons from all of those. Quickly, this is our model. We went for the JV approach in Winstanley, York, because that fitted the objectives of the council and the characteristics of the estate or the location. It's not the panacea for every scheme. We're at the stage where 4 shortlisted parties now at the second stage of the competitive dialogue process. We'll complete that by December this year, find a preferred partner. This will be about capturing that value and giving something back to the council, not just in capital or on new homes, but also in revenue. Key driver in this vehicle is to generate revenue for the local authority. And finally, the last slide really, the key to success, just to summarise up, preparation, 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 all the way through. For every aspect, every time you meet the community, you have to prepare. Every time you present, you have to have all your ducks in a row. Patience, this is a long-term game. This is not a short-term fix. That's why not all of the private sector really can do estate renewal. They have to be prepared to take the longer-term perspective. It's almost stating the obvious. Clarity and honesty must be at the very heart of this process. Being honest from the outset with the community about what is possible. The community is not the problem. The community is the solution. And the final point, good engagement is actually commercially sound judgment. Thank you.